Hey everyone, Howie Fisher from Fisher's Flies. Thanks for checking in. This is episode 2 in my Fulling Mill catalog series. This is Goodspeed's Private Stock Stone. This is an awesome tie, awesome fly, super fun to tie, but I will be honest, it is not for the faint of heart. This is a little bit more difficult of a tie. I'm using a new Fulling Mill 1715 Stealth Nymph hook from Fulling Mill in size 8, paired with a 4.6 millimeter bead from Resin fly. For the thread today, I'm using 140 denier UTC in tan, and I'm starting with my thread immediately behind the hook eye in front of where the bead will be. And we're starting here for the antenna. So you don't want to take a ton of wraps, but you want to give your material enough to hold on to. Here I'm using Flex-Floss Micro in a really cool color, Pat's Dark Ginger. This is a Fulling Mill product. And I'm using a pre-cut length to tie directly onto the top to make the antenna. And there's probably half a dozen different ways you could tie this on, but whatever you seem to find to work best for you. What I would recommend is make sure you don't do what I did and try and start immediately over top of the eye to save space. You do want to bring your thread back a little bit and start there. You want to make sure that you have enough room though for the bead to slide over these antenna, which can vary from bead to bead. But you really just want to make sure that you don't build up too much bulk. As long as you do that, you should be good to go. I'm going to whip finish in front of the bead, and this is to make sure that these antennae stay propped up. If you don't do this, sometimes when you slide the bead over, it can force them down. Not necessarily always, but it can do that. So you can see with the bead forward, it still sticks forward. Now I'm using 0.025 round lead, and this is going to be one to add some extra weight, but also to add some bulk. And this is where the fly gets a little bit more tricky. So in talking with Joe here, when getting some information about this fly, he said one of the keys to this fly is the flat body. It really makes sure that you have that profile of a big, fat, juicy stone fly. And so to do that here, I'm adding this 0.025 wire because it is bigger and thicker. And then I'm going to actually take a pair of scissors and I'm going to flatten this wire. I'm going to smash it down essentially. And this is going to cause the wire to make a flat body. Before doing that, I'm going to reattach my thread here. And I'm going to hit these lead wraps with a little bit of super glue. This step isn't necessarily important, but it'll make your life a lot easier. Sorry, it's important, but it's not 100% necessary, but it will make your life easier in this process. So again, I'm going to take a bunch of wraps, make sure that this lead is secure, especially once I start smashing it down. I really want to make sure that this lead doesn't go anywhere, which is why I added the super glue, and that was thin viscosity, by the way, from Zap-A-Gap. And then I'm going to add the tail portion of rubber legs. And I am going to take some wraps in front. And then again, just cover up some of these lead wraps. Once the lead is sufficiently covered, again, I'm going to take the back of a pair of flat scissors. You could use pliers as well for this if you have them. And I'm just going to gently but firmly start to flatten out this wire here to give it that flat profile that a stonefly body has. For the ribbing, I'm using UTC Ultra Wire in Brassie. You can see how flat that body is there. And I'm using black color. So I'm going to go ahead and attach this wire to, or at least do my best to attach this wire to the near side of the fly, and that's near to me. So as you're tying this again, you're attaching this to the near side of the fly to you. And I'm going to bring this back to where I tied in those rubber legs. And then I'm going to grab a couple more pieces of Flexi-Floss, and this body is specifically made from Flexi-Floss. And I'm using the same color I'm using for the tail and the antenna and the rest of the legs. And I'm just tying this in right at that tie-in point again, trying to build up a nice kind of even uh, body here, ramp to the back of that lead wire, just to make sure my life's a little easier. And I found in tying a bunch of these flies that the easiest way to do this really is to just grab 4 strands. And that makes life a little bit easier. And then you're using those 4 strands to tie up multiple flies rather than one, cutting it in half, or just using 1 or 2. But I'm going to go ahead and throw a whip finish in my fly, rest my thread on my bobbin, and then I'm going to use the rotary function on my vise to wrap these legs forward, or this leg material forward around the body. And you want to do this with some firm pressure, but not too firm, because you don't want to stretch the leg material out, but you do want to make sure that it's wrapping evenly. So once I reach to right behind the bead, I'm going to secure the Flexi-Floss and snip it off and set it aside. And again, I am going to use this for a couple flies. And once I've done that, I'm going to wrap my wire, and I'm going to counter wrap it here, which is why I tied it in on the near side of the hook. And the hardest part of this fly, well, not this fly, this step, is just making sure that the wire doesn't fall into the grooves and create uneven segmentation. Again, I'm going to get to right behind the bead, tie it off, and then break it free. The next step on this fly is going to be to add the wing casing. So I'm using bug back from Fulling Mill in dark brown veined. I'm going to go ahead and just snip a little bit of a notch in this bug back to give it a natural wing look from stonefly. And I'm going to tie this in about a third of the way back down the shank of the hook, or the body of the fly, I should say. You can see where my thread is, maybe a little less than a third, probably about a quarter of the way. If you've got some sticking in front of, like I do here, that's okay, because it's just going to get covered up. So for the legs here, it's actually 3 strands of Flexi-Floss, 2 in the Pat's orange or Pat's ginger, and then also going to add in a piece of barred Sexi floss from Montana Fly Company. You can also make your own barred if you'd like, but this is, again, in talking with Joe, the creator of this fly, that was something that he pointed out that he thinks makes this fly stand out, is the contrasting colors on the legs, and just adds another piece of depth to this fly. So I'm going to tie these in here, and I'm going to sweep these back and bring my thread in front. Next, I'm going to grab this Schmayan material clip. This is a super great tool. You can use wire or lead wire here if you don't have a material like this, or you can use, a hair clip, whatever. But just something to hold these legs back. It's going to make your life a little bit easier in finishing this fly, rather than trying to just hold these legs back. So once I've got that in place, I'm going to go ahead and grab my bug back again, And here I'm just creating a second wing case or second portion of wing case. If you look at a real stonefly, it does have two two wing cases that eventually bud out and create its actual wings when it's a full-blown adult. And they do have those same wing cases, or what are the wing cases in the nymph stage. So I'm going to tie this on immediately behind the bead like so. And I like to take a couple wraps in front of and underneath if you can squeeze that in, and just to make sure that thread's not going to go anywhere. Finally, I'm going to give it a little bit of a whip finish. Seat my knot, snip my thread off, and then I'm going to take this material clip off, and I'm going to trim these front legs up. When tying the legs in, you want to make sure the back legs are pretty much where you want them, and then you're going to come in and snip the front legs. I'm also going to trim the antenna and the tails if needed. And there you have it again. Super fun fly to tie, actually, but definitely is a more involved fly, not super easy or intuitive per se. And lastly, I'm going to hit it, of course, with some Solarez. I'm also going to hit the body with some Solarez as well to make sure that everything's just secure. You probably don't need to hit the body necessarily if you don't want to, but definitely hit those thread wraps. Make sure that they're not going anywhere or going to come undone. One thing I will say about this fly is when adding super glue on the lead wraps, just be careful not to add too much super glue. I did this probably 2 different times, and if you add too much, it actually will, especially that thin, it'll go into the front of the fly. Thanks for checking.